Ahoy! A new dev Q&A was just released and we are hearing about the expansion once again, this time about gear score, along with a lot of other interesting news. So let's get right into it. The first question was if there will be paid name changes. Kay responded that this is something they're working on, but they have no ETA on it yet. Hippie Stench asked about the bugged Dear Beloved questline. They said this should be fixed again now and apologized about this coming up again in the first place. The next two questions are kind of combined in a way, but a bit weird in that sense. Al Nathan asked if there are any plans for logs for the company treasury transactions, to which Kay responded that there are no plans right now, but they're discussing this. But then in the next question, Gyro and Sia asked when will we see company updates like the mission progress of the company and stuff like that, and is there any additional content for the company system inbound that is not PvP focused, things like housing, company quests, things like that. And this was already replied to in the last Q&A, which I already talked about. This is why I found the first response a little bit confusing, where they said, we have a number of improvements in mind for the company systems, big and small. We want to add a transaction log for the treasury. So again, it sounds like they already want to do that, so it's, I guess, something that's just in very early stages. And then they also talked about some longer term plans, like the company progression, where the leaders can set goals and you can track contributions. Ice Mike asked if a few specific features would be made better, especially the group finder, the housing and the trophy system, the storage system, and now the red enemy indicators along with gear sets. Is that we are constantly looking for ways to improve existing systems while balancing work on new content. As an example, regarding Group Finder, we are working towards cross-world expeditions, and improvements to Group Finder are considered part of that effort. Storage, trophies, and other existing features are also being looked at as we make overall improvements. I seem to recall that the devs already talked about trophies in particular on a dev talk before as well. Scanner had a very interesting suggestion, saying that it would be cool if we could get some incentive for higher level players to do lower level mutations, or higher gear score players I suppose in that sense, because it's kind of annoying to help new players and not get rewarded at all pretty much, or with minimal shots. Kay said, we have some plans related to this but can't share much right now. We have more to share with you later this year, so we'll have to just wait and see. But this may actually play into another change that's coming, so we'll get to that in a second. Mr. Robot asked about actual matchmaking for OPR and 3v3 arenas when crossover comes out. Rage responded, we won't have improved matchmaking when Crossworld OPR releases, but we are investigating ways we can improve this short and long term. Reality check. You can't have matchmaking when the player base is too low, and currently the player base is simply too low in almost every region except maybe in EU and maybe in NA East, but even that's already debatable. With New World having multiple smaller regions as well that have 1 or 2 servers at best, this is extremely difficult for them to execute because they basically have to make sure that those regions don't get the same matchmaking system, because otherwise too many people there would never find a match at all. So yeah, I would not expect this anytime soon unless New World blows up massively with the next expansion or something. Timon talked about the Ottoman T-set, which mentions Damascus, and asked if Damascus will make it into the game. And Kay basically points out that there are already multiple places in the game that are referring to real places in the world, and that doesn't mean that those places will be in the game. Jay Oddity said that OPR feels like it has become heavily filled with pre-made groups since the leaderboards were introduced, and asked if it would be possible to make victories only count for the leaderboards if not in a pre-made, so making the leaderboard a solo leaderboard. Rage responded, we do not want to discourage group play since that is healthy for the game mode, but we are also introducing cross-world OPR and regional leaderboards with increased reward tiers, which will increase the competitive pool. Hopefully you'll start seeing a lot of new faces soon to compete against on the leaderboard. Amonostariel asked about plans for Fresh Start, with them slowly dying out at the moment. Delacon said, we'll have some news for low population Fresh Start World soon, likely sometime next week. Please look forward to it. The obvious part of that will likely be merging the 2 remaining EU Central servers, Nyx and Kronos. Maybe they will also merge US West into US East, so Isabella into Lilith. I'm not sure if that's the plan that they have, but it could imagine it technically being a thing. What they do about the other servers, I have no idea. Sutek, for example, in AP Southeast is just absolutely dead, less than 200 concurrent players. So I wouldn't be surprised if they scrap that one altogether and say, okay, that's just going into the legacy server now. But so far they have stood by their statement of not merging into legacy at all with Fresh Start, so we'll have to wait and see. Higurashi asked if there will be SEA servers. This is something that they want to facilitate and talk about regularly, but they need to ensure there's sufficient player demand for opening a new region. It's not easy to spin up a new data center in any region, even when leveraging AWS, though AWS does help. In addition to spinning up new worlds themselves, backend services that support the game need to be recreated and ensure seamless communication with the rest of the global technology stack. Furthermore, there's also regional legalities and other aspects of territory publishing to consider, especially customer support. Keep that in mind, that's a huge chunk probably as well. But all of this work is definitely achievable, and ultimately we simply need to ensure that the long-term player interest is there, because no one wants a glut of empty words. So please continue to let us know if you want an Asia-located world, and have your friends who play who are also interested share their desires too. Again, I don't expect this anytime soon, not with the current population. Maybe with the add-on is something where they might start thinking about it again, but even then I feel like it's relatively unlikely, because Asia has a lot of other MMOs that are very popular there. I don't know, the demand for New World was definitely there in the beginning, as we saw with the AP Southeast servers being pretty flooded. But unless the AP Southeast servers get massively bigger again, I don't think they'll see much indication to introduce SEA servers. Epileptic FB asked for a fishing overhaul. Nozamas responded, many of us also love fishing, and an update to the experience is actually coming fairly soon, with room to possibly expand in the future. Part of the upcoming changes do deal with treasure chests, so we hope you'll enjoy it. Keep in mind, this doesn't necessarily mean that they will increase the rewards of treasure chests. It may just mean that they decrease the drop rate of treasure chests from rare fish spawns, which I think a lot of people would actually like, because treasure chests are just not very effective and not what most people want when they're fishing. Knowledge Ben asked, when will you overhaul the Ward and Bane system? The grind for the different Ward sets to get them all to 625 is extremely tiresome, mainly because the drops and mutations as well as from global bosses are way too low in quality. We understand it's difficult to get the ideal pieces of loot sometimes. There are current discussions about perks and loot buckets, but they aren't specifically regarding Bane and Ward perks at this time. Again, I don't think they want to touch this all too much, because it is one of the major parts of progression in the game, as of this time at least. But it may still be affected by the next change. Token asked, will the new max gear score increase obsolete our current gear? Will our current 625 be upgradable into the new gear score max? Yes and no. 625 will not be upgradable to the new gear score max, since new systems that adjust gear score will be coming later this year. More detailed information will be revealed in the future. This is incredibly interesting. So first off, I think I misread this initially. I thought the yes and no both refers to the second sentence, saying that essentially your 625 gear will be upgradable, but not into the new gear score max for some reason, because it's getting reset. But now reading it again, I'm pretty sure it actually means yes, your current gear will be obsolete, and no, you will not be upgrading your 625 gear to the new max. So they're just saying it's a hard reset. I also initially interpreted them saying that there will be new systems that adjust gear score coming, as saying that basically gear score as a whole will be overhauled, but it doesn't necessarily need to mean that. They could easily do a 650 or 675 gear score as the new maximum, and the new system is how you upgrade it now. So instead of using umbral shards, you're using a new resource or something. But that wouldn't quite make sense with not being able to upgrade the gear that we currently have. So I'm guessing you will maybe be able to farm gear, just drops, normal drops, at 650 gear score, and you won't be able to upgrade your current gear to 650, and then need shards or whatever the new currency is in that form, to upgrade to 675 or something along those lines. That's what I'm assuming they mean by new system. Unless they actually mean a full reset on gear score and they're just changing it entirely. I'm not entirely sure, but it sounds a little bit more likely that they just have a new upgrading system where we need to farm something, probably from the new area, from something that you get in the expansion. I know that there will be a lot of players that will be very upset about this, either because they swipe their credit card or because they spend a lot of time farming best in slot gear. As somebody who originally comes from World of Warcraft, to me this is just standard procedure. I'm used to getting expansions and resetting gear score that way. I don't think that gear that you farm years and years and years ago should be viable forever. I also believe that it adds to the content if everyone needs to get new gear, because otherwise it very quickly becomes a sitting in town with your biz gear and waiting for something to do kind of job again, which is the situation for a lot of players right now. And just so you're aware, because I've done a ton of trading, I have a bunch of biz pieces. It's not like I'm just looking out for myself here. But what I think will be extremely important here is that they give us better pathways towards best in slot gear, so that in the future when people are grinding gear, they actually have the potential to get there without farming tons and tons and tons of gold, or maybe even not through gold at all. Maybe the drops will be what provides us with more biz gear, or some specific crafting way that is restricted to resources you maybe need to farm yourself and can't buy on the market, and the item will be buying on pickup. I don't know. We will see. We will see what they feel about trading versus crafting versus farming. That's all gonna be something that's out in the open, and that may change. But for now, we can just wait in that regard. So I'm very curious what they're coming up with. I will, however, end up with some incredibly empty storages when this is done. Blendy asked if they have any plans to add the option to save attributes and or skill tree respecs to gear set loadouts. There are discussions about this very idea, but they've yet to be finalized. Tam2con suggested fashion sets in the same way that we have gear sets for different transmog outfits or different skin outfits. I said this is a really cool idea. I bring this up with the team. Magnus Oder asked for a fix to the old Hermit's pastime fishing rod. This is something that's still on their radar, and they introduced a partial fix, but they're still working on fixing this fully, and the broken and missing pole issue as well. XBP New Life wanted to know if there are going to be perks for stats like attack speed and move speed. Nozamas responded, there have been no discussions for attack speed perks, and movement speed is somewhat limited by hardware. If you're eager to get around a turn faster, mounts will do just that. And I really hope that they stick to that in terms of movement speed at least. I do not want to see movement speed items in New World, seeing what certain haste effects already do to balance. Keen speed is cool and I really like it, but I think that's basically the way it should stay. There should not be unconditional movement speed on items, because kiting would get even worse than it's now. Vendrizzle asked if there are going to be any updates soon on the release of a new weapon. This is on the roadmap. It's the weapon that is coming in the expansion, and we know it's a focus weapon. Leonard asked what the difference between the Athos engine that New World uses and the Open 3D engine is, and if New World will ever run on Open 3D. Delacon says they share the same beginnings, but the Azoth engine is a forked and heavily modified version at this point, customized for the needs of New World. We have maintained our own internal engine team that continues to develop new tools and technology for developers. We do not have plans to remerge into the Open 3D engine branch at this time. Landy asked if there are any plans to allow us to reset territory standing cards. Some of us made poor choices in our youth. Nozamas made a bit of a joke here about choices and what you learn and blah blah blah. Kind of forgot that back when we invested into those cards, the perks on those cards actually work differently. So it's not really a learned lesson after all. If anything, it's a learned lesson on their side not to change card effects after they created them in a certain way. But anyways, that said, yes, there are plans to enable territory standing card resets. So that's great to hear, especially for those who invested heavily into gathering speed once upon a time, because that used to be gathering yield and now it's not. And at the same time also obviously housing tax, which is a joke now compared to what it used to be. So overall this should lead to some good changes for a lot of players in terms of what they have with their territory standing, so I'm glad we're gonna get that reset. Vestan asked if there's any chance to reduce the amount of refining and crafting gear, like a master refining set, master crafting set, which you can get by combining all other pieces and sets. And then this stuff with the Concocter set having the same stuff as the Arcanist set. So this may be something we could address in the future, they say, but it's not currently on their radar. As for the Concocter set, I've made a direct bug report for you. I'm a bit confused about that. The Concocter set has been like that for ages, and if they change that now and change that to yield, that would actually lead to problems for people who have been using the Concocter set instead of the Arcanist set. So I feel like it's a bit too late to fix that, quote unquote. I'd rather have them combine both of the sets into one instead. Later today, we'll talk about shrinking fortification versus elemental aversion, how damage mitigation works and all that. Part 1 essentially. but it's going to be very in-depth. It's going to be very interesting. Hopefully there will be a lot of information that many of you may not be aware of. If you're interested in that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And in the next days, we'll also talk about recommended gear for each role based on the information that we're getting, and also an in-depth mutation guide. If you want early trading tips, then you can support me on my Patreon. Thanks to my patrons who already do exactly that. And thank you for watching. Duke Sloth, out.